morning, everyone. It's good to see you today. I joked in the last service that if there is such a thing as a spiritual hangover, I think a lot of our musicians have that on this weekend because we just finished our concerts and they were just absolutely amazing. How many of you got to see the concert? Really, really well done. That involved a number of the people from our praise team who were a part of it and just did a superb job. So I'm really, really grateful for them. And then here they are back up here leading worship today. I like that last song, Faithful. I hadn't planned to get into the sermon this way today, but we are talking about an aspect of glory that's different from the typical. And I think our typical aspect of glory is one we associate a lot with Christmas, that is supposed to be this joyful, glorious kind of time of year. But how many of you would say, you know, my life just doesn't feel so glorious right now? One of the hard things about being a pastor is you can't be honest sometimes. I can't get up and tell you, like, Susan and I had the worst fight last night. We're not even talking to each other right now. No, I got to get up and like my marriage is just fine. Now, that's not happened, by the way. It's been a while since we've had that kind of fight, but it's happened before. And to get up and then talk about what glorious things God is doing when you're carrying something inside of you. I will say, I do feel like life is really busy and life has a lot going on with it. And there are mornings I can wake up in the middle of the night for who knows what reason, but then what happens? The mind gets going. I got this to get done. How are we going to get this done? There's this that's not figured out yet. And kaboom, it's like, yep, you're wide awake. How many of you right now would say you might have a relational something going on? You've got work stuff going on. You've got things you're trying to get ready for. You feel like there's a lot of expectation about December. And you feel like this is a heavy time. It's a heavy time for. How many of you would say it's a heavy time? There's a lot of people in here with their hand up right now. I bet it's that way every Sunday. So in the pattern of keeping it real, let's get into our message today, even as we celebrate incredible things happening right now, just down the road at Midtown. Let us pray. Lord, we celebrate what your Spirit is doing. You've moved people to come into a room full at St. Luke's Midtown. That's not a different church, it's part of our church. We're in different physical locations now. And we pray that through Pastor Mindy, you're presenting a word of hope that's meeting people in a real way, right where they are right now. Walking in the door, wondering, is this going to be a fake church? Is it going to be a genuine church? Do I feel safe here? And that people would feel safe and secure and know that you meet people there right where they really are. You meet us here today right where we really are. So open our hearts now to hear what you might want to say to us today, and then to move and act upon what we hear in the way that you would guide us. In Christ's name, amen. Well, let's talk about somebody who did not have an easy life, Mary McLeod Bethune. She didn't have an easy life, but she had a big dream in her life, and that was to start a college that could allow black students to get an education who might not be able to get one otherwise. She realized that dream, and that school became what we call today Bethune-Cookman University. She had a habit of speaking at the commencement ceremonies every year, and she would always use the same closing remark to the students before they went out into the world. She would say these words: faith ought not be a puny thing. If you believe, have faith like a giant. And may God grant you not peace, but glory. Those were always her closing words. Not peace, but glory. Now, when you know something about Dr. Bethune's life, you can appreciate what she says here about faith, but especially her understanding here of glory. She was born in 1875 in South Carolina. Both of her parents had been slaves. But for some reason, she had this belief that if she could get an education, that might get her out of working in the fields for the rest of her life. So she went to a one-room segregated schoolhouse. Remarkably, when she finished that, she was able to go to the Moody Bible Institute College in Chicago. After she got her degree, she returned to her home state and started teaching. In 1938, she wrote, "If our people are to fight their way up out of bondage, we must arm them with the sword and the shield and the buckler of pride, belief in themselves and their possibilities, based upon a sure knowledge of the achievements of the past." Now, she did not have that understanding because of some power of positive thinking seminar she went to. It came from her Methodist faith and upbringing that gave her determination to believe that when people told her it can't be done, that she would continue and say, "Yes, it can." When they told her, "Do you have any idea how much money this is going to cost? You'll never be able to afford it," she said, "Yes, we will." When they said, but you are a woman and you're too young, you won't be respected," she said, "Oh, yes, I will." And she was. And she did, so that at the age of 29, she started the school that today continues to graduate some of our nation's finest leaders and professionals. In 1941, she wrote an essay entitled "Faith That Moves a Dump Heap." And in that title gives the history of the origins of the university. The first land she bought, the only land she could afford, was the former town dump called Hell's Hole. Only land she could afford. She bought it, and then to raise money to build a building and start a school, she sold sweet potato pies and ice cream. But she did it through her belief in God's power and help and the dream that she had. So every year when she said to students, "Faith ought not be a puny thing, and may God give you not peace, but glory," it was, in the words of the article that I read about this story, it was Bethune's way of telling her students that the battles that matter and the causes that are worthy of our lives are rarely accomplished without difficulty, courage, and sacrifice. May God give you not peace, but glory. Now, that is a different understanding of glory. Pastor Javon kicked us off last week in this series in which we're thinking about glory during Advent. Have you ever paid attention to the Christmas music, how much of it sings about glory? He introduced us to one of the two Old Testament words for glory, Shekinah. Now, Shekinah literally means dwelling, the dwelling of God. It's the ways God's presence is revealed to us, but Shekinah has this understanding of spectacular, dazzling bright, like the cloud that would descend on the tabernacle in the wilderness when Moses would go in to meet with the presence of God. Whenever he came out, do you remember what the Bible says? His face was shiny, bright. He'd have to put a veil over his face because his face was so bright. Now, the New Testament word for glory is doxa, D-O-X-A. It's the word from which we get doxology. It means praise. And praise, doxa, has the same understanding as Shekinah, sort of. There are places in the New Testament where you have this reference to glory that connotes this idea of dazzling beauty, brightness. Like when the angels came to the shepherds in the field to tell them about the birth of Jesus. It says the glory of the Lord shone around them. It has this understanding of brightness, of something dazzling. The story about Jesus' transfiguration has this. He went up on a mountain, he brought several of the disciples, and a cloud came upon them, the manifestation of God's presence. And he appeared with Elijah and Moses, and all of the Gospels describe this event in a number of ways that kind of say the same thing. Dazzling bright, like the sun, bright as a flash of lightning. So doxa sounds a lot like Shekinah until you read this statement about the transfiguration in Luke's gospel. It says they, meaning Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, appeared in glory and were speaking about Jesus' exodus, which he was about to fulfill in Jerusalem. His exodus? We know what that is, don't we? Moses and Elijah were talking to Jesus about his crucifixion. Now, crucifixion is not something we typically associate with glory, but it's very much a part of the description of glory in the New Testament. For instance, in John's Gospel, Jesus says, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." In John's Gospel, whenever Jesus talks about his glory or being glorified, he's talking about his crucifixion. Even Paul references glory in this kind of a way. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul talks about being persecuted, being afflicted, being struck down for his faithful actions, but then says, our slight momentary affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory. Now that expression, eternal weight of glory, is a very interesting one. Paul is associating glory now, not with Shekinah, but the other Old Testament word for glory. The other word is kabod. Say that with me. Kabod. Now, if you really did it well, if we had Rabbi Brett here with us, I think he'd probably tell us, if you say it correctly, you're probably going to get a little spit on the back of the head of the person in front of you. Chabad. Chabad. I won't have you do that, though. Chabad. You might recognize the word because it appears in a name in the Old Testament. We might not recognize the name from the Old Testament, but we probably would from the story of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. What is the name? Ichabod, crane. Ichabod. It means unglory, without glory. Kabod means glory. Literally, the word is translated weightiness, heaviness. Now, we're going to dig into the word a lot more next week. In fact, next Sunday's sermon title is this phrase from Paul, the weight of glory. I introduce it today because when we're going through painful times, Jesus' crucifixion, difficult times, times we don't want, difficult. We often talk about them in terms of heavy. We'll say, yeah, I'm just going through a heavy time right now. Just as a life is really heavy. We'll talk about carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. Why would the Bible use a word that means heavy to describe glory? Because sometimes God's greatest glory is revealed in the hardest times of life. God's greatest glory is revealed in the heavy times. Pastor Javon last week referenced this experience in Moses' life where he requested to see God's glory. He said, "Show me your glory." That came after many years of Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness to the promised land, and he was weary. He was weighed down. He was weighed down by the complaints of the people constantly. He was weighed down by his own self-doubt, wondering, Lord, do I even have what it takes to finish the job? And he was weighed down by the feeling that God's presence was not always near enough. So one day, when God encountered him, he just said, Lord, I need your glory. Show me your glory. So, in response, God said to him, I will make all my goodness pass before you. Ruth Haley Barton reflects on this story and says God's goodness is his greatest glory, and it's what we most need. Sometimes when we're going through a heavy period, it's tempting to pray, Lord, lighten my load, take away my heaviness, just help these problems go away. And what we need is God's goodness. that meets us in our heaviness, and just something about knowing that God is with us gives us the strength to keep going. So what we don't really need is for the removal of our heaviness, but the ability to get through them, because sometimes you can get rid of the heaviness and lose the glory at the same time. Perhaps the better prayer is to say, Lord, help me see your glory in what I'm going through. That might be a prayer some of you could find helpful today. Maybe some of you are going through some heaviness. Perhaps you're a caregiver to somebody. You're taking care maybe of someone you love, and it's heavy. And you're wanting God to lighten the load, but what you need to see is that what you're doing is glory. There's glory in it. Maybe some of you are teachers, or you're healthcare professionals, or you're public servants of some kind. And maybe the rest of the world is telling you, oh, COVID is a thing of the past, but you're like, really? It isn't in my world. It is still hard, it is still demanding, and I'm worn out with it. I am worn out with it. And you're like, God, just get rid of it for me. But what you are doing has the content of glory in it. And you need to see God's glory. Maybe you're taking care of your family, and there's perhaps a particular need that makes it feel every day like the battle is uphill. You're just not getting the job done. You're not taking care of the need like you wish you could take care of it. Why is it so hard? Get rid of the hardness, Lord. But there's glory in what you're doing. Maybe what you need is not peace, but glory. Henry Nouwen was a Catholic priest, mystic, author, and he was searching for glory in the early part of his career. He wanted to do what God wanted him to do. That would be glory for him. And of course, he had a gift of teaching, and he went to the places that would feel glorious. He taught at Notre Dame. That didn't work so well. He went to Yale. That wasn't so great. Then he went to Harvard, and I think Harvard was probably the worst of all in his career, because he felt like the faculty didn't accept him, that maybe he wasn't as esteemed of a teacher as they were. And he's like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I just want to be where God wants me to be. So he accepted an invitation to go to France, to the place where the L'Arche community started. This is a community for handicapped people of varying degrees. Some of the extreme people who were there required round the clock, almost every minute, care and attention. A place that you would expect for the caregivers could be absolutely exhausting and demanding. He went there to live for a year, and he had a transformation in his life. He experienced glory there. Not just in the servers, but in the handicapped people in the community. They brought him glory. It changed his life. He wrote about the experience almost every day in a journal. And when the year came to an end, he accepted the invitation to come to Toronto, where the large community there called Daybreak, he would be their priest. So he put his journals together into a book called The Road to Daybreak. And in one of the journal entries, he wrote about glory, the difference between human glory and God's glory. He said human glory is when we are seeking the approval of people, and that just makes us competitive. And in this journal, he asked the question, how then do we come to see and receive God's glory? In his gospel, John shows that God chose to reveal his glory to us in humiliation. This is good, but also the disturbing news. God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to reveal his divinity to us, not through competition, but through compassion. That is, through suffering with us. That is the deepest reason for living in solidarity with the poor, with the oppressed, and handicapped people. They are the ones through whom God's glory can manifest itself to us. It's always interesting to me to talk to people who go to serve in missions and outreach, to serve the poorest of the world. Sometimes it's in our own community. Sometimes it's around the world. But what I often find people will say, and they will tell you if they do it over and over again, it's what makes them want to do it more and more. That they perhaps went at first thinking, I'm going to take some glory to these poor people. I've got so much, they have so little, I should share it. I'm going to be a glory bringer. And what they will say is, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the glory I needed. The glory that these people gave me, that they have so much more than I have. That's why I do this. It's for what I need. That's what the stable is all about. Jesus was born in a stable, not a palace, not a spectacular cradle. He was born in a barn. Now, we glamorize the stable today. We lose a little bit of its meaning, but not for the first century readers of Scripture. They would have gotten it. They would have understood that the stable's a dirty place. Lauren sang a song in the concert called Let the Stable Still Astonish. And there's some wonderful words in that song. It talks about the stable having a straw dirt floor, being dusty, crumbling crooked walls. The point was to recognize that the glory of the universe doesn't come to a place that sparkles. It comes to a place that's foul and unclean. That's where glory can be found. That's many times in life the glory we need. About the time that Henry Nouwen wrote his words in his journal, I was going to my first church in the mountains in North Carolina. It was at the base of Cold Mountain, the name of the Charles Claude Fraser novel. And there was a woman who literally lived at the base of the mountain, and people in the church told me she had a severely handicapped child. Some years before, she and her husband were in the hospital after they delivered this daughter, and they were told the baby would not live long, so they came home to care for this baby for what they thought would be less than a week. They sang to the baby, prayed over the baby, fed the baby, changed the baby's diapers. But she didn't die after a week. She didn't die after a year. She didn't die after a decade. When I went to visit that home, she had recently celebrated her 37th birthday. Still bedridden, still needing to be spoon-fed, still needing to have her diaper changed, unable to make any kind of communication beyond a grunt or a groan. I'm embarrassed that I cannot remember the full name of the mother. Everyone just called her Aunt Nell. So I would go to see Aunt Nell, and whatever room she was working in the home, she would wheel the daughter's bed into that room, which usually was the kitchen. And it seemed like whenever I visited, there was always some kind of hot food on the stove. I visited Aunt Nell quite often when I was single during those days. She would fix me a bowl of something. I would sit at her kitchen table, and then I would watch her work. And as she was working, she would sing. And every now and then she'd walk over to her daughter's bed, and she'd rub her forehead and brush her hair back and kiss her on the forehead and say, "How is my sweet baby doing? You know, Mama loves you. How are you?" 37 years. I would leave that house and wonder to myself, how? That's got to be hard. I never said that to her. I knew, as nice as she was, she would scold me if I ever said that to her. She would say to me, "Hard? You think this is hard? You go back to school. You got more to learn." This is beautiful. I guess it was reading that article about Mary McLeod Bethune that I believe I learned how she was able to do that. That she somewhere in her life learned to pray like Dr. Bethune did. Lord, give me not peace, but glory. Let's pray. Lord, some of us need glory today. Not the glory that is shiny and spectacular. At first thought, that might be what we ask for. Lord, give us a lighter load. Make our life more dazzling than it feels. Make our load easier to bear. Take it away from us even. But maybe today we'll think with a little pause and wonder if we wouldn't lose something else if the weight were taken away, that we might also lose some glory, that there's glory in the heaviness. Help us to see your glory, Lord, your glory that reveals goodness in hard times, the glory Jesus spoke about, the glory that when we have a cross to bear, you bear it with us and you get us through it, and you reveal things we wouldn't know or see otherwise. It's nice to have peace, but sometimes that's not what we need. We need something even greater, your glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. And so on this first Sunday of the month, we celebrate sharing together Holy Communion and remembering Jesus when his hour of glory arrived, gathered his disciples around him, took bread from the Passover meal and gave it new meaning. He said, "This is my body. It's broken and it's given for you. From now on, take and eat this in remembrance of me."
In the same way, when the supper was over, he took a cup, he blessed it. He gave it to them and said, "This is my blood of the new covenant. It's poured out for you and for many, for the whole world, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you drink of it in remembrance of me."
So Lord, our prayer right now is for your Holy Spirit to come and transform these gifts of loaf and cup into the mysterious spiritual presence of the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. That in receiving these elements, they may transform us to be people who partake of your glory and find that you give us the strength to face all that we face in life. Sometimes it's dazzling and beautiful. Sometimes it's hard and difficult. But in all, it is glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I got it.
I forget. Eric said he would be doing this part.
It's good. We're eager to have you come. Well, in just a second, I'm going to invite our ushers and those who are serving communion to come and join Pastor Rob and I here down in the front. We want to let you know if you're joining us online, this is the moment to make sure you've got your communion elements, that you can receive them as well. And to remind you that at St. Luke's, we practice an open table. Everybody is welcome to come and receive. It doesn't matter if you're first time here, if you're a part of our church, this is a means of grace of God. We want to let you know in that same spirit that all the bread that we'll partake is gluten-free, and the cup that we'll share with you is grape juice. And so we'll invite you to come down either of these side aisles. If you're here in person, we'll place a cube of bread in your hand and invite you to take a cup with you. The altar rails here are open. We'd love for you to come and pray. Maybe there's a need you have for more of God's glory in your life that you'd love to lift up. And then to go back by the outside aisles to take your seat again. With those who are serving, come now and join us in the front. And if you have a need, if you're not able to come forward, just lift a hand and know that our team would be glad to come and bring communion to you.